roundtables, the dialogues about the present and the future with the international scientists within the All-Russian Festival of Science. And I would like to thank our great experts and our great speakers today for joining our session, for finding time in their tight schedules, and also the audience who is watching us behind the screen. And today's session will be devoted to the different context of the Arctic, because the Arctic is the territory of merging contexts. And we are going to talk about the socio-ecological systems of the Arctic, which exist in balance of fragile nature and people of the North. And I hope that we will have a very nice and warm autumn discussion today with our great speakers. And first, I would like to give a floor to Dr. Margareta Johansson, Associate Professor at the Department of Physical Geography and Ecosystem Science, Lund University, and also the coordinator of Great Interact Network. Margareta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you for inviting us to this session. We are delighted to be here, of course. So I will just try to share my screen, and you will let me know if you cannot see it. Can you see my screen? Great.
Yes, we can.
Very much. So I seize this opportunity to tell the world about Interact. There might be some of you that have already heard about Interact, and there might be some that have not. So I hope there will be some news for everyone. Interact is a network of 89 terrestrial research stations. They are based on land in all Arctic countries. You can see the dots on the map. We are quite widely distributed throughout the Arctic. You can learn more about all these research stations on our website. So they're all presented on our website. We have also a station catalog that is like a travel magazine for scientists, more or less, that you can go to different research stations to do research, because what Julia was talking about earlier is, of course, we need research to figure out what's going on in the Arctic. And that is what Interact can facilitate. But we also have a card game. If you are bored on a Friday evening, or whatever evening you prefer, then you can have a card game learning about the different research stations in the Arctic. When they were open, how much precipitation. You will learn that Greenland might be a very cold place, and that Iceland is a very rainy place, for example. But you can also learn about ongoing research. We have got an Interact GIS where you can click on the different research stations and you can find out what research is ongoing. So if you're thinking about doing some research, then of course you want to go to a place and make sure that you might have the right environment for that, or that it has not already been done. So that you can figure out by either looking at the GIS or in the catalog with research and monitoring. We are now with Interact 3. So Interact is an EU-funded project, and it is the third project that is funded by the EU. So the first one started already in 2011, so we have been going on for a decade now. But Interact 3 that we are running now started 1st of January last year. We have 63 partners from all Arctic countries that receives funding from the EU, and we have a total budget of 10 million euros. We spend half of that money, a little more than half, on sending scientists to the field. We have got something called transnational access. This is that research scientists from all over the world can apply to go to research station for free access to these research stations. They have to go to another country than their own. We have an annual call, and we are actually at the moment we have an annual call open. So if you are thinking about doing research in the Arctic, why don't you visit our website and see if either of the 53 research stations in Interact 3 that are providing free transnational access, if either would suit you, then please submit an application. So far, we have sent more than 1,000 scientists to the field with this transnational access, and this you can see where they come from and where they're going. All the where there is a map is where we have got research stations. So you can see we are sending east, west, wherever. And a lot of peer review publications have come out of it, and that number is of course growing every day, because it takes a couple of years. When you get home, you have to analyze your data and then you publish. We also would like to argue that we are contributing to science diplomacy, and we say that because we think we have sort of opened up the whole Arctic for, well, the access to the research stations in all of the Arctic. And also there have been some quite unique findings from this transnational access visits. And of course, the ones who have already listened about Interact, you know this little fellow by now. But if you haven't seen him, this is Bombus interacti. The ultimate love declaration that we actually had a group of scientists that found a new bumblebee species in Alaska at Tule Lake Research Station, and they named it after Interact. So we are, of course, very honored and very happy that we can contribute to new science like this about the Arctic. If you want to learn more about these different transnational access projects, we published Stories of Arctic Science in 2015. There are 2 spreadsheets for each of the project, where we are talking about what they did, why they did it, where they did it, and the adventure. If you want to make people interested in the Arctic, you should talk about the adventure as well, because usually it is quite an adventure to work in the Arctic. In 2020, we made a second Stories of the Arctic Stories of Arctic Science volume, and it has also been accompanied by an Interact ebook, where you can use it on your tablet or your phone, or just also on the web, but you can get more information, not just the stories, but you can learn more about it. We have videos, we have animations, etc., trying to explain what's going on. In addition to this transnational access, which is when we are sending scientists to the field, we also have something called remote access, which has been very helpful now during COVID, because as you all know, we have been stuck and very few scientists have been able to go to the field. But with remote access, we have still been able to do some of the science if there were staff at the research station. This basically means that station staff collects or do your research, and then they can send back samples or whatever you want them to do. And you can also apply for this now with the ongoing call. In addition to being very useful when it was COVID, it is of course very environmental friendly, which we should all think about. And then last but not least, we are offering virtual access, which is access to real data. So we have a database, a data portal, that way you can go and download real data from some of the Interact station. And this is something that is being developed at the moment. So far we have, I think, 29 stations that should join, and then there will be hopefully more and more joining. We also, in addition to provide the research stations to scientists, we also want to make sure that the scientists do things safe. And we have managers that is running those research stations that have many years experience. We use them, haha, to dig out the information needed. And then we produce things that can be useful for scientists that are actually visiting the stations. For example, the Fieldwork Planning Handbook. If you want to go to the field, this is very good to read beforehand. Then you know what to bring, what to think about, how to, I mean, there are so many things. In the Arctic, you can't really have forgotten something and then go to the nearby store, because usually there is no nearby store. So it's good to be prepared. There is also a practical field guide that you have, where we have, oh, sorry. That's not what I wanted to do. A practical field guide that you can bring to the field. Then the latest in the edition is fieldwork communication and navigation. So when you are in the Arctic, how can you navigate when you are there and get around? And this is done by the Station Managers Forum. They have also quite a lot of publications that you can find on our website. And this one I especially want to show. It's images of Arctic science, where they had a photo competition, and it is just very, very, very nice photos illustrating the Arctic and what's on fieldwork in the Arctic. As you know, one picture can say very much more than how many words? Very many words. We are also focusing on 6 societal challenges that we have identified that is relevant for the Arctic. One is unpredictable Arctic extreme weather events. So here we are trying to look at what is needed to better predict extreme weather events in the future by looking at existing data and models and what is the mismatch, etc. In addition, we are having community-based monitoring of extreme weather events in Russia, and also we are looking at how extreme event, how it affects the biodiversity. So there are different things that we are looking at there. We're also trying to look at the connecting the Arctic, transport and communication. You know about this agreement with the Arctic Council that will make it easier for people and samples and other things to move across borders. And we are looking at how that has it have an impact on the research station. Can we see now that it is easier to bring people in and samples out and people out, etc. And also to look at what communication is needed at the research station in the Arctic to better conduct our research and to make the data available. And making data available, we have research stations that have been running for more than 100 years. And 100 years ago, there were no computers, as you know. And obviously the data ended up maybe in a cupboard somewhere or in a drawer or somewhere. And of course, that is a treasure. We really need to find ways to dig out those old data and make sure that they are visible. So we are working with companies that are specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning to figure out how can we make more data available by using clever techniques. We are also improving education and awareness, and we are working together with the BBC Natural History Studios unit to present ongoing things in the Arctic and why we should care. Also looking at pollution. And trying to what are the emerging pollutions in the Arctic, and how can we monitor them at the different research stations? Is it possible? And try to set up a monitoring scheme. Then last but not least, when the Arctic becomes more accessible, then of course we have increasing tourism, and that is something that is already ongoing. How can we make sure that the increasing tourism is sustainable and that it doesn't destroy the life of people that are living there? So we are working together with indigenous peoples here, as well as tourist companies, to try to develop guidelines that can help for future, that can help people in the Arctic, hopefully, so that the future tourism will be sustainable. And that was my short presentation, but of course you can have the long version at any time. Please visit our website then at eu-interact.org, or we are of course on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. So please don't hesitate to contact us through either of those channels. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Margareta, for such a great comprehensive presentation, and it's amazing to see how much Interact has done for the last 10 years, and I'm very proud to be also representing the station of Moscow State University, being the part of Interact. And I have to say that during this 10 years, we have evaluated just recently. We have had 17 international projects going at our station. And also, I think that we have developed a very nice transnational access mechanism, not only transnational access, but also virtual access and remote access, as you mentioned. And of course, a lot of new international collaborations, which are very important, not only to our station, but also to the science itself. And I just want to have one question, because it's in the title of network, the International Network for Terrestrial Research. Is there a place for social scientists?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So they can apply to your calls and also come to the field?
Yes, you can come from any faculty or I mean, any discipline. Absolutely. It is not, I mean, the majority of the applications are from natural sciences, yes, but there are social scientists that have applied for transnational access. There are archaeologists, there are, I mean, law people working with law. You can work with whatever you like, and you're of course very welcome to. We have also medicine. I mean, so we have, when we are looking at the composition of the board that is evaluating the different applications that come in from transnational access, we have a very wide disciplinary background of the different board members, ranging from medical, yeah, whatever. It is a very wide, so everyone is welcome to apply, of course.
Okay, thank you so much. And at this note, I would like to give a microphone and also ask the question to Dr. Gareth Rees, Associate Professor at Scott Paul Research Institute, University of Cambridge. And Gareth is also has been to our station for quite some time, around 30 years, I think. And Gareth knows pretty well about the Interact project and has been actually coming to our station through Interact project as well. And probably Gareth can tell us a little bit about their studies, how they perceive the fragile nature and how they see this socio-ecological context in their research. Gareth, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. Thank you for the invitation to contribute to this event. Margareta, that was a fantastic introduction to Interact. I really enjoyed it, and it reminded me of the many reasons why Interact is such an effective scheme. As Julia said, I've been using the Moscow State University field station in the Khyvenia Mountains in northwestern Russia through the Interact scheme, and actually before the Interact scheme as well, for quite some time. And it's been a phenomenally useful resource for me. The kind of thing that we mainly have been studying, and this has been nearly all in collaboration with colleagues in Moscow State University. We started by focusing particularly on the impact of pollution. There's air pollution generated from the industrial activity that takes place on the Kola Peninsula, and some of that's quite close to the field station. And it's been a really good base for studying that. We still do that, and in fact, it's becoming it's becoming a more a hotter topic for us, I think, developing techniques for pollution monitoring. But the main thing that we've been doing over the last, certainly during the entire Interact period and before that, is broader than that. It's looking at the dynamics of vegetation at high latitudes and seeing how it responds to whatever are the things that are pushing it. And that's pollution, but it's also climate change and other kinds of anthropogenic stress. So if I can say something maybe about this specific field station, which is part of the Interact network, why I have been using it so successfully for nearly 30 years. The location is really useful one. It's because it's sheltered on the north side by mountains, and the arrangement of the prevailing winds, it's actually possible to find within a relatively small distance of this field station both areas which are pretty clean and quite close to natural state, and areas which are exposed and have been exposed historically to really high levels of industrial pollution. So it's great for making transects. So we make lots of transects over time and transects over space. So scientifically, it's a good place to work. I've worked in a couple of other Interact stations, one in Russia, one in Sweden, and I can say similar things about those, and I have plans right now to respond to the call for Interact 3. So there is another station in Russia that I want to be working in next year. And if I may, one of the aspects of the Interact scheme that you mentioned quite early on, Margareta, was science diplomacy. And you kind of moved away quite quickly from that, but I think it's actually really, really important. I think the importance of science diplomacy as an activity is hard to overstate right now. Between all countries, Arctic countries and not Arctic countries, countries that are well aligned politically, and maybe more important, between countries that are not so well aligned politically with one another. It's an area that I've been myself becoming increasingly involved in the last about 5 years, I think. And I think the role that the Interact network has been playing and can play in the future in promoting this really important activity is very high indeed. Okay, I think that was my response to your invitation, Julia. I can talk much more, but maybe it's time to be quiet.
Now that thank you so much, Gareth. And actually, your talk reminded me also how I entered the field of socio-ecological systems. It was the project, just to remind you, in 2009, 2011, I think that we have met first time at that time. And I've been involved a little bit to your project team, the project benefits, which has been the part of the IPY PPS Arctic project. And that particular part was called Natural and Social Science Research Cooperation in Northern Russia and Norway for mutual benefits across national scientific borders. So that was quite an important part, which actually made my further science pathway, I would say. And also I think that, keeping in mind International Polar Year, I don't think that we should think of it right now, because it's still like 10 years ahead, or 10 or so, the next International Polar Year. But I do hope that the legacy of Interact project will be highlighted during the IPY, because I don't feel like we did have anything similar before. So that would be great, just to highlight the importance and to see this legacy during the upcoming International Polar Year. But also, while managing the station and having Interact and having user groups, researchers coming to our way, I was asked a lot of questions whether we do any marine research, as we didn't, but it is one of most important things for us. For example, being located at Kola Peninsula, surrounded by 2 seas, White Sea and the Barents Sea, it is quite an important. And also it is very important to see the whole picture, not only look at the terrestrial part or natural sciences, social sciences, just to be more as much comprehensive as possible. So I just would like to give a floor at this point to Dr. Martin Solin, professor in marine ecology within Ocean and Earth Science, National Oceanography Center, Southampton, at the University of Southampton. Martin, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yulia, and thank you again for inviting me this morning. I apologize that our institute has the longest name on the planet, but here we are. I have a few slides, so if I can just share my screen, I'll just do that now. Hopefully everything will work. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, wow, it's working, great. So I just thought I've just prepared kind of a few slides here just to highlight collaboration. So previous speakers have all highlighted some mechanisms for support, and another one to add in there is I know there's a call at the moment focused on Russian female early career researchers. So there's other opportunities there to collaborate, across Europe indeed. So these are just a couple of thoughts that I thought might be useful. So obviously I don't need to explain that the Arctic's under changing, but by way of an introduction about myself, kind of my background's really been through the Changing Arctic Ocean Programme, which was a UK funded programme in the Northern Barents Sea. But I'm also doing some work in Canada and increasingly working with colleagues in St. Petersburg. So throughout the world, there's a major investment in understanding the consequences of climate change. So what I thought would be interesting would be just to kind of reflect on some of the opportunities that we tend not to see. So I've kind of focused this really between the UK and Russia, as that's where I'm based, and the marine sciences. But if you do kind of a search of the literature, you can see that in terms of publications, and I know that's not everything, but in terms of scientific publications, in terms of just the number of publications, America is in the lead, which you'd expect. It's a very big nation and well-funded, followed by Canada, again, not a surprise there, given the border to the Arctic, and then Norway and Russia. And the UK is lagging a little bit behind, but we do have some presence, and this is the interconnections from a UK perspective, and actually this line here indicating the link between UK and Russia is underdeveloped, but it's changing rapidly. So there's a lot of new research, which is really nice to see coming through, and I'm sure it's the same for these other countries. I haven't linked those; it's quite complicated to do. And just in recent years, these are just a couple of figures that were in Nature magazine, showing the upturn in collaborations between Russian authors and authors from elsewhere, and that the upturn and interest in research in the Arctic. Obviously that's been accelerated by as climate change is expressed, but also the various polar years and so on, and themed research programs have helped with that. What I wanted to highlight, though, is the differences in expertise. So the collaboration potential is high. So this is, I know this looks like a bit like a spider has walked across the screen, but this is really a bibliometric analysis. Don't worry about the detail, just look at the colors. So this is all the science, the marine science in the Arctic, by UK-led research, about 776 papers. And you can see that there's various areas, to do with salt marsh, plant vegetation, to do with sediment chemistry, to do with sea ice, and a few other areas. And if you contrast that across to Russian research, it's about the same number of papers, actually, 712. You can see that there's a lot more to do with biogeochemistry, a lot more to do with species, biodiversity, and a lot more to do with development. But what I wanted to kind of point out is that there's some overlap, if you look in colours, between the two countries, red and red. But Russia has got a different set of expertise to the UK. So if we put that all together and we look at all of the papers together, there's this kind of tremendous opportunity to have a much wider collaborative coverage of the subject matter. And given this conversation today, one of the areas that that benefits from this is socio-ecological science. So there's good reasons to collaborate, other than the fact that we would just like to do so. But scientifically, there's a number of lines of argument. This figure here, I'll just skip over this rather quickly, but this is the number of collaborations just in recent years between, in this case, Russia and the UK. And you can see that this web is not as complicated as what is possible when we take the full expertise that is available. And this is because the UK and Russia, like any other country, have come from different backgrounds and different approaches. And when we're starting to look at complex issues in the Arctic, this becomes really, really quite important to gain from that diversity of ideas. The other thing I would just mention as well, this is just one database, OBIS, which is online. It's an international database for those of you that are not familiar with it. And these are all the data records relative to the Arctic. And there's just two quick points that I want to point out here is that this is by time period. All this kind of green data on this side is kind of a huge Russian and Scandinavian data sets, essentially. All this is kind of Canadian and US data sets, and the UK have got quite a lot in the middle. And kind of a few other spaces. But what's really important to note is that actually Russia holds all the really old data, the pre-kind of global warming data set, whereas other countries have kind of come in a little bit late to the party. So we've got good information, but we've got the background information comes from the Russian archives, and there's a lot of it. So most of the theory and conceptual advances have been based on recent information. So a lot of the things we're talking about, like managing the Arctic and looking at the resilience of the Arctic, has been based on, the narrative has been based on recent papers. And what we need to do is extend backwards over time. And that might change perspectives quite considerably, I would imagine. And you know, these are just I had the pleasure of visiting St. Petersburg just before COVID struck, and you know, I was impressed by the amount of records there in the museums that are available to us. So there's both the information that has been written, but an archive, but there's also physical samples that extend back to the 1800s. So you know, as you're alluding to today, you know, if we're to solve anything in the Arctic, we need to think across the Arctic, and socio-ecological networks are quite underdeveloped in the Arctic at the moment. This is just one example, actually, from a team in Canada, and this is one of the first socio-ecological networks that I've seen in literature, and it's based on a number of locations indicated by these blue circles. And surveys and socio-ecological techniques that have been applied there. But there's not many of these available, certainly, and this is with a marine focus, of course. There's more when we think about terrestrial systems. But you can see the interconnections between, if you just look at the colours, between ecosystem processes and services and human well-being, and then climatic drivers, and how this network forms. And this is certainly one area where there's a lot of interest. The other thing that comes from this particular study is that depending on this network doesn't necessarily work in the same way in different locations. So when we start taking this wider view around the Arctic, we'll start to understand how the expression of climate change affects people and affects the whole socio-ecological network in different ways. So there's an area there that I think is emerging and will be vital in the next few years. This is just a quick example. We worked with these authors here from the Zoological Institute in St. Petersburg, and by combining our different expertises, we were within a few days actually we were able to start making predictions about biodiversity loss, the consequences of biodiversity loss, and we're working on some manuscripts related to that at the moment. So we've now got a predictive capacity for regions of the White Sea in terms of what will happen, what has happened, and a kind of transition that took place in the White Sea in the early 2000s, and we're using that to help us predict into the future. So, you know, again, by sharing that data and that expertise, it was very, very productive, as you'll imagine. So that's all I wanted to say, really. It was just to kind of highlight very briefly that you know, we need to use the best available evidence, and between us all, we have that, and then this kind of move to socio-ecological systems and exploring that becomes possible through collaboration. So hopefully that will add some fuel to the debate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Martin. It's great to see how much of the international collaboration you do with the Russian scientists as well. And Margareta also has mentioned education and awareness as the part of Interact. And Martin has also showed in the socio-ecological context the knowledge systems, and a little bit of transfer in between them. And at this point, I think that I will give a microphone to our last speaker, but not least, of course, Dr. Mairi Bitten, professor in Carnegie School of Education, Leeds Beckett University, UK. Mairi, can you tell us a little bit about how you see the education systems, maybe an application for the Arctic? Oh, please unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you so much.
I think I'll perhaps share my slides, because I think, thank you first of all for the invitation to join this interdisciplinary event today. I think that's really interesting to see the natural sciences and the social scientists working together. And I guess I want to speak back to what Martin was referring to about human well-being, and that factor of socio-ecological understanding of the Arctic being really important. So I'm going to share my slides because, like Margarita, I'm going to take the opportunity to share some work we've been doing. Not all of it, because that would take forever, but I'm going to just share this. So I wanted to talk primarily about educational research across the north. Oh, sorry, I am having trouble with my screen. Let me just try this again. And to introduce you in the same way as Margarita introduced Interact, to introduce you to, I am primarily involved in educational research in the Arctic, or perhaps in the North is sometimes how we say it, through an organisation called the University of the Arctic Thematic Network for Teacher Education for Social Justice and Diversity. It was founded in 2015. And it was started because we felt that there was a need for researchers, but also for teachers and young people, to work around the Arctic in collaboration to address educational issues. We had a number of aims when we started, and I'm happy to report that all those bullet points have now been ticked. And we also came up with a sort of strap line so that we could explain to other people what our real interest was, which was, we want to co-create with other researchers around the world, teachers and young people themselves, culturally responsive Arctic pedagogies and transformative teacher education to enable agency and sustainability for the circumpolar north. And we now actually have representation from organisations in all the countries right round the Arctic, which has allowed us to have a real coverage. There was a book published in 1990 which spoke about education in the Arctic, and it missed Russia out completely, which we felt was just a travesty. So we have a book coming out with Springer Nature next year, which will also include our colleagues from Russia. So we're trying to do that coverage right across. We have a number of focus areas: inclusion, decolonialization, obviously with that people idea, working with many of the indigenous communities as we do. Decolonialization is really important. Decolonialization of the curriculum, decolonialization of the pedagogy that is used in educational settings, right from nursery right up to higher education. Decolonialization of assessment, but also the actual research that we undertake, that we use research methodologies within our research that are culturally sensitive to the Arctic and the peoples of the Arctic. As with everybody, we were already interested in digital pedagogy, and over the course of the global pandemic, that's become increasingly important, particularly because many of the educational institutions in the Arctic are set in quite remote rural settings. We have an interest in Indigenous and minority heritage languages and how they are represented within education in the North, and also how we prepare teachers and support them once they're working in the Arctic, because there's an ongoing problem or challenge related to retention of teachers working in the North. And we feel that if we address the sort of 5 issues above, we'll actually keep our teachers in the North for longer. And then, just because this is a conversation rather than a presentation, I put some thoughts that I was having that we might discuss as a group. We often, as a group, when we get together, we talk about what does the North mean. We talk about Arctic pedagogy, but we also talk about Northern pedagogy. And quite often we spend a lot of our time discussing whether there are educational foci or issues or challenges that are factors that are distinctive to the North or to the Arctic region. We obviously think there are, but I'd be interested in your viewpoints as well. And about challenging the metronormative nature of much teacher education, and indeed education. So many of the national policies of the different countries around the North are in the south of the country, and yet many of the educational establishments are in the North, remote, rural, with Indigenous communities. How do we change teacher education so it suits those communities? And this is something that I'd be really interested in the other speakers' opinions on. How do we include key stakeholders in this research? And the real challenge for you as natural scientists, many of you, how do you include children and very young children? In many ways, sustainability, climate change, pollution, all the sort of natural science topics that you've been talking about today are of great concern to our young people in our educational institutions. And how do you include them in the discussion, in the data collection? We have a research project ongoing just now where we are inviting young people almost to be the data collectors from the elders in their communities around what has changed in their communities as far as the climate is concerned, and how has that impacted on their lives. How do we decolonialize national curriculum, including the science curriculum, pedagogy, assessment? And how do we continue to decolonialize educational research in the North or the Arctic? So some questions to finish off here. I'll stop sharing now.
No, please don't stop.
Oh, okay.
We will need those questions, I think, because they are quite interesting. Thank you so much, Mary, for bringing them up. And you know, while you asked the first question regarding the North, what do we mean by North? I had the immediate thought that some time ago I just described in one of my works the changing paradigm from the understanding of local people, local residents of my Arctic region, of Murmansk region, how it shifted from the northern resident, which we call in Russian Severianin, Sever, north in Russian, to the Arctic resident, because I've been interviewing some local population over here, and all the time when I ask them how they feel about different issues coming up in the Arctic region, they say like, no, we live in the North, not in the Arctic. Arctic is somewhere there, outside in the North, in the ice cap, somewhere out there. So that's quite interesting. Maybe some other speakers have some thoughts on that. What is the difference then? What do we mean by North, and what do we mean by Arctic? Maybe in the natural sciences sense, we have more standing borders, like they're described in different groups of working groups of the Arctic Council, but maybe they can share from their experience, from their field experience, how they feel that. Yeah, just go ahead, Gareth.
Just an observation on what you said, Julia. It's interesting to me to hear this view expressed from people who live in the North. They don't live in the Arctic, so that the boundary of the Arctic is further north than anywhere I live, kind of thing. I think in the natural sciences, we probably tend to go the other way and to define the Arctic as something which often enough extends beyond the strict astronomical definition of the Arctic, which stops at the Arctic Circle, so that it is scientifically convenient. And a number of organizations do the same thing. So the domain, which IASC considers, for example, certainly comes south of the Arctic Circle in several places. So one person's north is clearly another person's Arctic and the other way around.
Yeah, thank you, Kari. That's right. And also we have the so-called third pole, which is the alpine environment in any way. So Interact also has alpine stations in the network, right, Margareta?
Yes, you're quite right, Julia, that we do have some stations that are not in the Arctic, but they are in alpine area. And because they have similar environmental issue to deal with, I think it makes sense to include them in the network. They are from Europe, basically, because of course it started as an EU-funded project, so that's why we started off in Europe and then grew to the Arctic, which was lovely. But again, if you talk about definitions of the North and the Arctic, I mean, I'm trained in the natural science, as you say. I've been working with the Arctic Council's working group. So, of course, the AMAP definition is what I immediately think of when you say Arctic. And that's, well, of course, that's it. But then, of course, yeah, it is, yeah, it includes a lot of things, as Gareth said. So,
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Gareth, go ahead.
If I may, Julia, I'd like to respond to another of the points that Mari made, which is question number 4 on this list, which is about how we include key stakeholders in the development of Arctic education, if you can call it that. And it's not the only one, but I just wanted to mention here the existence of an organization called Polar Educators International, which the way I think of what it does anyway, I think of a Venn diagram that has 3, like all Venn diagrams, has 3 intersecting domains in it. One of those is the domain of research. One is educators, I mean principally school-age educators, and one is children, the recipients of education. And the area of operation of this organization, Polar Educators International, it has a website, is kind of in the middle part of that Venn diagram, so where these 3 areas overlap. So the idea is that scientific research, and that includes both social science as well as natural science research, has a mechanism to inform and be informed by the practice of education. And where that's carried out in the North, I think it's especially valuable to do that. I mean, some of this activity happens outside the North as well. So in the UK, for example, which is not part of the Arctic, but there are people who are engaged in thinking about how one does this effectively. So that was my comment.
Thank you so much, Gareth. Yeah, Martin, go ahead.
I was thinking about, if you just, I'll jump back a step to the boundaries between what's the Arctic and what's the North, because in marine circles, of course, it's very dynamic. It's not fixed. So we talk about Atlantic currents versus Arctic currents, for example, and they change between summer and winter. And because many people that live in and around the Arctic are either semi-nomadic or even nomadic, that boundary changes. So it's an interesting transition to try and build that in. But of course, we're always challenged by doing research work in the Arctic outside of the summer season, because many parts of the year we don't actually get the data that we want or need for those parts of the year. So there's this kind of transient change to that rigid boundary, which I think makes it a bit more of a complex issue to take account of. So it's interesting. But just picking up on what Gareth said, and how do we include key stakeholders? I think quite often in research, I think it's fair to say that the inclusion of stakeholders has been the afterthought, or the kind of the module at the end of the proposal that kind of says, and now we're going to speak to all these people. And of course, that's the wrong starting point. We should have been speaking to people before we even write a single word of the proposal. So I think it's about knowing what your audience want and what they need, and then spending time to both identify the appropriate champions within those communities. I'm also within the science community, but actually to spend time, I guess, how would you phrase it, making friends really in a way, and gaining trust in terms of what it is you want, and that avoids this problem of being seen to kind of come in, land in a place that you're not that familiar with, do your research program and then leave again, and with no legacy. So I think having that long-term view of where the participants are part of a longer-term viewpoint, I think is really important. And that viewpoint needs to start before the research and go after that research, so that legacy can be built on. So, and then in terms of children, and very young children in particular, I mean, there's lots of techniques that are used in the social sciences, either interviews or gaming or kind of survey work, where you can use lots of different age groups, and of course this extends to other aspects like gender or income or other things. So you get that diversity of opinion, and by incorporating it and making it fun, I think that will help in that way. So I guess in a way it's designing a business model almost about how this is going to work with a long-term goal in mind that everyone can focus on. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, just go ahead, Mairi. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is music to my ears, and I would pay tribute to the Polar Educators organisation that Gareth has mentioned, because I think one of the most important things, I think, for us as educators is that young people have access to rigorous research evidence in ways that they can understand. And I think that the Polar Educators is one really good way of doing it. But I think as well, within some of our research funding bids, I think that almost interdisciplinary research funding bids, where we have opportunities, yes, to do really robust natural science, but also have dissemination or discussion with young people. I think there's a real opportunity there. I'm thinking from that socio-ecological point of view, I think there's lots of opportunities across the north of the Arctic for sort of joint research funding bids that could incorporate both, because I think a lot of good things could come from that.
Yes, thank you so much, Mairi. Yeah, just go ahead. Oh, Margareta? Yeah.
Yes, no, I just wanted to say a little bit what we were doing in Interact as well when reaching out to kids. So first of all, I mean, we are working with EduArctic, the coordinators of EduArctic, that have built up this fantastic network with schools in more than 50, 60 countries. I can't remember, but round about that. So a lot, and they have a very, very good network. So whenever we are creating educational material, then it can be distributed. And also we have had quite many questions about what is needed, what do they want, what do the teachers need in the classroom to make sure that they can actually teach something, and then they have come with suggestions what we can do, and then we have responded to that and developed toolkits that they can then use in school and things like that. But in addition to that collaboration, we're also working together with a UK charity called Wicked Weather Watch, which are a charity that is again out in schools talking about the ongoing changes, climate changes, and I think they're doing a brilliant job. And we have the possibility to use the information, all the information that we have gathered about what's going on in the Arctic, and they can help us to disseminate that in an easy, understandable way. So I was talking about this interactive ebook before that we have produced. There will also be additional material on each of the stories, and there you will have experiments for schools. You will have well, crosswords, yeah, whatever you can find. You know, find a pair of binoculars and look around and what is hiding underneath the permafrost and things like that. So we think that collaboration is also very, very fruitful when we can use other people's resources as we use, that's a terrible word, collaborate, and get information to the young, because they really need it, as you say, and especially during the COVID time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Margareta. And Interact cards is still my favorite. Yeah. Thank you so much for all your opinions and all your visions. I would like to add over here regarding this inclusion of key stakeholders is not only happens. I think that we should ask not how we need to include them, but when. I do remember all those discussions that we have at the international level at different conferences on developing the dialogue in between key stakeholders. Once we get to some kind of point of the dialogue, we then start to talk about when we should include key stakeholders to developing the research projects. And this is what we are discussing at the moment with some of my colleagues in academia, is the co-creation of knowledge, is when you do have an idea of any research projects, you need to understand who will be the final users, who will be those for whom you're doing your research, particularly in practice, and you need to include them at the very beginning of the project rather than at the end of the project, which I think makes sense. And getting to the point of school kids and as key stakeholders as well, I think that we need to also discuss not only what we as scientists can do for them, but also what they as school kids can do for us, because at times we being scientists are a little bit too complicated in the ways of our thinking, while the school kid can actually phrase anything in a very simple way. When you realize that, oh my God, I found the answer to the question that has been too complicated in my head. That's my experience from the 5 years of involvement in the science club of my friend teacher from Arizona, Flagstaff, Jillian, and it was quite nice to be a mentor for her school kids, talking with them, even though remotely, via online communication. Talk to them regarding different science things and develop with them science projects, because we worked on different on research papers, on projects, on specific science topics, and it was very nice, because when they asked me, when I received any email with a lot of questions, I thought that, okay, I will have like 5 minutes and I will answer all of them just quickly. And then I usually spend 1 hour or 1 hour and a half trying to answer in a simple way for a school kid some of the science things that I supposed to explain. So I think that's an important thing that you have brought up, Mairi. Thank you so much. And also, I just would like to say that on Wednesday, 13 October, we will also have another another session on science and education in the Arctic. So please join and share your thoughts. And I think that we are going to finish the session. If you have any quick words, just to say. No? Thank you so much. So, okay, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, and for your knowledge. And looking forward to meeting you whether online or in person soon. Please take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.